Well, I think we are officially live now. Woo!
Yeah.
So today, welcome. We are talking about global development. So working with people across the globe in different time zones and countries and mental states and all kinds of different things. If you're here, we can see your comments as they come up, as maybe you saw earlier with Jer, and we can answer your questions and speak to that stuff. So please don't hold back, ask questions. So I think the first thing that we want to talk about, which to me is kind of the root of what makes remote development of any kind work, which is that you absolutely have to be intentional about your communication. You can't leave anything up to chance or a game of telephone or anything like that. What does that look like to you guys?
Well, first of all, I agree that you have to be intentional because you don't have that occasional accidental run into other people. You don't have the water cooler. So you have to be intentional about creating substitutes for that. Yeah? I've heard that when smoking was still allowed in companies, that the people who were best informed were actually the smokers.
Yep.
Why? The smokers from all different departments across all different projects all gathered in the same place and started talking with each other. So they were the best informed people in the entire organization. Yeah, and there is something to it. I don't take me wrong. I'm not recommending smoking, no matter what my shirt says. But yeah, it's about communication.
So we need a virtual smoking lounge, is what you're saying, in every company.
Yes.
We'll talk about Tool, I think, a little bit later too, but I think you see that movement, right? You see those virtual workspace tools, even things like, Zoom and with the breakout rooms. And I think applications are moving towards that, to where you have to be intentionally creating a space. I do like that we're being intentional with communication, being intentional with everything. And I think Christian nailed it. You don't get those, oh, hey, there's this meeting in the conference room over there. Let's just, grab the person at the desk and or let's all go to lunch. Like we think about intentional about things like team building and stuff, right? It's no big deal to have a team go to lunch together when you're in the office.
Yep.
It feels like a different story when everyone's remote and it's like, hey, let's do a team lunch and schedule a meeting on the calendar for that, and kind of feels formal when it's on the calendar, right? And breaking those barriers down and still having it feel like a good thing is different.
Yep, absolutely. And it's definitely a different feeling to get used to when you have a scheduled team lunch together, sitting at your work computer in your own house, eating on camera. It's like a very different feeling than just, going to the pub.
Yeah. Although I have to admit, there's a cultural aspect to this. Yeah. Depending on, because I'm living in India. Yeah. Despite my fair skin, I have some 10 years, 15 years almost experience in South Asia now. And the level of comfort that people have with having their camera on is greatly influenced by their culture and socioeconomic background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And also, you have to balance that with, it's always going to go better if you can see the other person that you're talking to instead of just speaking into a digital void. So what are some mitigations for that, do you think, for people who don't want to invite you into their home?
I think those emoji reactions that some tools have are extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I noticed this in an amplified situation when I'm training teams. And when you're sitting in a classroom physically with the people and you have these 15 people in front of you and you're trying to be a little bit funny, be entertaining and crack a joke, you see the reaction of the people. You see whether they're smiling, whether they're glued to your lips, or whether they are bored. You get that physical feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're online and everyone has the camera off, you're talking to crickets.
Yeah.
And that can make it very straining, very difficult. And if people just use a little bit of emojis as reactions, like just listen in and hover the mouse near the emoji button, and when you think yeah, you agree, make a thumbs up. Yeah, if you think that was funny, make a smile or so. That will not replace as a full substitute, but at least make it a little bit better than total cricket silence.
Yeah.
Yeah. That actually brings me to another point too, Christian. It's really good because like not only like the video thing, like, you know, even personally myself, right, in larger, more open areas, right, if we have 15, 20 people on the call, you notice people get quiet. Like that's myself, right? It's hard to interject yourself with the, you know, the video lag, the audio lag, like that synchronicity stuff. So I've seen like, and I actually have some, I'm going to use them, like cue cards.
Ah,
Right.
love
Cool.
that.
And so you can quickly like kind of flag things. And you know, you could make them on paper, print them out, and give them to your team. Like these are kind of professionally made, and there's vendors that do that, right? So it's like you can quickly have things to like flag for teams if they don't feel comfortable, or if it's hard to interject, or if you're always on mute, and like to get on mute when the conversation's passed.
Yeah.
And so those little tools and tricks too could help with larger groups and things if you're shy. You know.
Yeah, I'm going to pull a comment up from John Kern. He says you can be sloppier when working next to each other, sloppier, but being remote forces one to be more explicit about communicating and collaborating, which I couldn't agree more. For exactly the reason that Christian said, when you're remote, you don't have access to see somebody's countenance, to see somebody's body language, to feel the vibe. So something else that I have seen to help in these situations, like, you know, I would join with my camera, but I don't want to show you my house, for example. You can see that Christian and I are in the same location, but really we're just using a virtual background. So I'm inviting you into our virtual home, I guess, that we live together in this analogy. But I don't have to show you where I'm actually physically sitting at all.
Yeah, and one can also get a. Sorry, you go.
No, you go.
I think a cloth green screen and a green screen stand, they're also not that expensive. They're pretty affordable. So if you want to hide your home but be on camera, you can get a green screen that you can just quickly put up behind your back during work hours and then stow away in the evening.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, just kind of picking on John's comments still. So maybe more exclusively about communication and collaborating. I kind of want to talk about that collaborating piece because I kind of thought about, we've talked about how we maybe talk through some meetings and be intentional about communication, but like, what about work-related stuff? Like, how would we hand off things, or how would we explicitly be more communicative about things we're working on?
Yeah, and that's a really common question, actually, when we talk about these things out in the world, is how do you handle handoffs? How do you handle different time zones?
I mean, handoffs is kind of already an add-on, in my opinion, a great add-on, but usually people still work a lot solo. And that's something that I think is difficult already if you're working in the office, but it's even more difficult if you're working remote, because your geographical situation is much more disconnected. And work is actually much more about collaboration than a lot of people think, including probably us who say that it's a lot about collaboration. It's probably even more than that.
Yeah.
And so handoffs actually is kind of already a great situation, because what does it mean? It means that you're working on the same stuff, yeah, not just the same project, but the same maybe work items, the same user stories or tickets or whatever, and you utilize your spread across time zones to finish work faster as a team. Then you could maybe do it when you're all working in the same time zone. Yeah, and then of course handoff also becomes a topic. Yeah, and then you want the handoff to not be a Chinese whisper, but you want the handoff to work right. And if you do something like ensemble programming, then the handoff becomes so much easier, because basically you use your overlap time, and you have to consciously manage overlap time for such things, and use that overlap time so that people that in the morning go online, they join the already running ensemble, and then there's an overlap for an hour or two, and then the other people are in the evening and sign off. Yeah, so at least where you don't have a gap in your time zone coverage, by using ensemble programming, you basically eliminate the Chinese whisper element of handoffs and replace Chinese whisper handoff with proper collaboration.
Yeah, you enable continuous continuity for work, but you also enable just more natural kind of context sharing. So it's less of a handoff and more of a, we're working on this and people are popping in and out as needed. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's where I was leading to, Emma, too, is like you got to make those handoffs not feel like handoffs, right? Sitting in a meeting where I just regurgitate what I did for the day and where I'm heading is very different than like, hey, we're in the middle of this feature, we're adding this button to do X, Y, and Z. Come along for the ride, right? And you're driving next, right? You're writing the code in the next 10 minutes, and I'll help you navigate in the direction we're headed. Rather than just me saying like, oh, we still have this feature X, Y, and Z. All right, Christian, you got it. See ya.
Yeah, good
right?
luck.
It really is like, no, let's bring them into the work as best we can, and as long as our overlap can allow.
And I think as well,
like a handoff.
As much as we can break things down to be small slices, then the less we need to kind of transplant this much context every time, which is true. I'm going to pull this comment over from John Kern again. When do you know a handoff might not work or be effective? That's a good question.
I'm going to be the weird one and say handoffs are never effective.
That's also my opinion.
So, handoffs to increase cycle time, right? We know there's a handoff. We know there's some kind of knowledge transfer. We know there's some kind of queue that's going to slow something down.
Yep.
And so minimizing those handoffs and making them as seamless as possible, I think, is probably the number one thing to make collaboration feel great.
Yeah.
So avoiding those, again, I think the big tool that I lean towards is those vertically sliced kind of tasks. Give a group of people something that they can work kind of in a silo, but still integrate quickly. Building a new feature out of the product, if they can build it in such a way that they integrate often and quickly to minimize conflict would be great.
Yeah, I think it's become my catchphrase lately, but to me, every handoff is a context loss, every single one. If you're handing off, business folks are getting the requirements for a story and then putting them in a story for developers to pick up later, that's a handoff and a ton of context just got lost. When a developer finishes a piece of work and gives it to a QA team to test, that's a ton of context lost every single time.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of these things, how we think about such processes at work, are coming from manufacturing. And I think manufacturing is full of good ideas. But in this particular thing, we have to consider that what we are doing is not like an assembly line, but it is like a design team for a product. Yeah, the assembly line is fully automated. That's our build tools and compiler and stuff. Yeah? What we do isn't on an assembly line. On an assembly line, the handoffs work because you have a uniform interface. It's always the same car and always the same doors you put on the car.
Yeah.
As a simplified example. It's also a tough job. But it works regarding handoffs much better. And if we look at the history with Ford and the assembly line, the first assembly line was not that successful. It had huge quality problems. And then the remedy was to make sure that people from stations rotate with the station before and the station after. Exactly, because even in manufacturing, you need the context.
Yeah.
And in information work, the context is so much more important even.
Right, exactly.
So I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So the interesting thought there too, that kind of wrap up. If we stick with that vertical slice, the full feature kind of handoff modality, if a team or a mob or even a singular person can handle that, the handoff I've seen effective, or at least the knowledge transfer, whatever you want to call it, right? The briefing is usually right. If something's implemented and it's a complicated enough feature, maybe there's a demo or a tour internal to the team saying this is how I structured it. These are kind of the files. If there's something wrong, this is the tests. This is the behaviors that I know of, and kind of give you a little product demo internal to the team on how things are organized. Can help with that once a product is finished or features finished.
Yeah. We've also seen something else we've seen work in, because obviously everyone's not working in an ideal utopia where everything's thin vertical slices and magical overlaps and ensembles, right? So something else we've seen work is have somebody be like a shepherd of the work. So you have some big, huge thing that isn't the ideal world thing that you want. One person's going to make sure that they're on, and maybe that means they have to modify their hours a little bit to have some overlap with other people. Maybe it means that other people need to modify their hours to have some overlap, which we've seen in the past. But that person with the context is kind of always sticking with the work to know what's going on. Again, not ideal, but a solution.
Yeah, and I think what's also important in order to basically reduce handoffs is to have a common coding standard.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Especially if you take something off the shelf like extreme programming and its practices with test-driven development and with CRC cards, or maybe you don't like them and you replace them with discovery trees, fine, perfectly fine. But something of that sort, which can easily visualize your work, including the breakdown structure on different levels of abstraction without having to context switch between different browser tabs a lot and stuff. Yeah. So something like Jira doesn't work for that.
Yeah.
And with such things, you can make handoffs so much easier. Yeah, because what it also means is you will always work on things that someone else has done. And then how do you know that you don't break stuff? Tests are very important for that. The tests have to not just exist, they have to assert stuff, and they have to communicate intent about behavior.
Yeah, they have to assert useful stuff.
Yeah.
Not just true. Yeah, I think that's true. And that speaks to what you were saying earlier as well, as that, that's, we were talking about legacy code in that situation, but having a safety net, being able to feel safe in making changes and in continuing work when you're not always in the same time zone with the rest of your team. You have to have that safety net somehow, and automated test is a great way to do that. I think that's true.
Saying automated code formatting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in a situation where every handoff means that people, the first thing they do is reformat the code to their liking.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then the diffs. Horrifying diffs. So one thing I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit more, if you two don't mind, is Christian had brought up the idea of overlap. So that's something that has worked well on teams that I've been on that are around the globe, is this idea of core hours. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, core hours is generally looking at the team and having a discussion and seeing when it makes sense for the majority of the team to always be available. And by be available means we can message, we can be in a meeting, we can talk person to person, right? As much as synchronous as possible. Typically, the more time zones, the less the hours get. But you probably, my rule of thumb is hopefully 4 hours is the minimum. 3 to 4 hours should hopefully be the minimum overlap to allow for those conversations and demos and updates and all of the moving parts that teams could see. But what do you all think?
Yeah, I would agree. And you know what I think you brought up when we talked about this another time, that sometimes a company will say, all right, our core hours are this span of 9 full hours. And that's when you have to be online and available for 9 hours. That is unrealistic and painful. It has to be what you said. It has to be that overlap here. So 3 hours or whatever, like this is when you need to be sitting here, whatever. Otherwise, take your kid to school and then come back and do whatever. Do what you got to do, live your life. But during this chunk of time, we really need to be able to collaborate. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it should be a team thing, a team decision. Different teams have different people, so they have to come up with what their core hours are.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, what does it mean, core hours? It means maximizing overlap time.
Yeah.
And then you see when you're working across time zones, people would have to compromise quite a lot on their personal lives, more than is ethically tolerable to have realistically the same core hours. It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So then overlaps is basically the second best thing you can do after core hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'm sorry, Adam, you were going to say something and then several people were typing.
Yeah, no, you're fine. It was core hours, and like some organizations are saying, yeah, these 9 hours are our core hours, and that's when everybody works. Those are also the same corporation that says you're on 10 projects and you get 10% time of each one.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, okay. I get 4 hours a week, and it's rough managing those kind of things. So yeah, core hours really is designed to help you know you're available for the team, and not that you're not working your full whatever time you need to work, right? It's knowing that you're readily available to be for this, right? For talking, for collaborating, for interacting.
That's actually a really good thing to call out. It's collaboration core hours, not necessarily a work schedule. It's collaboration. It's for collaboration specifically. So let's see. We talked about a couple different things here we could call back to. One was different kind of tools that we use. One was different kind of team building activities that we've seen work in a remote setting. Where do we kind of want to go from here?
I mean, the fun team building stuff sounds fun. Oh,
okay, let's go team building. Let's go team building.
Okay.
Yeah. I
always think it interesting again because it's it's like those forced happy hours and things like that always seem to, I hear the most about when I'm with teams, right? It's like, I'm on this happy hour meeting and I feel like I have to go and we don't have fun. And that's when I see the most people, if it's a large happy hour with the company, you see most people off camera, you have no idea what they're doing. Right. And so it just feels awkward. But I think you miss that. That's probably the number one thing I miss from in person. You don't get the lunches, you don't get the water cooler chats, you don't get the, just the random things you do in an office. And so being intentional, because I think that's the theme for today, is like just be intentional with everything. Mm-hmm. It's thinking about how do those things look different, and how can you do things differently that might not feel forced. And so I think one of the big success ones I've had is actually do something physical, but stay on the phone with the team and talk. Right. And so I've gone with walks on teams before. We all join Zoom on my cell phone, or on our mobile devices. Yeah. Plug in some headphones and we go for a walk. It gets us out, gets us talking. And it doesn't feel forced because you're more natural. You're not stuck in front of your computer and yet you feel yet another meeting in your calendar, things like that. Yeah, staring at a screen. I love that idea, actually. And the really nice thing about modern headphones is the noise cancellation. So the whole team doesn't have to hear me huffing and puffing around the block. Have you guys seen anything different for team building? What have you all done for remote team building stuff? My favorite is always
online games.
Yep, Jinx.
Go
ahead.
So some online games that don't require a lot of skill and practice and are just fun and short rounds. That can be really great.
Yeah, we used to play Among Us every once in a while. We would all be like kind of stressed out or something like that. And, like, okay, well, we're going to have a team time and we're going to just play Among Us. So join up if you want to do that. It was super fun. And also we found out who was good at lying. So some different cool stuff that I have seen, and I'm kind of meshing with tools a little bit, but I've seen some cool tools that are specifically good for this. Like one that I am just getting into now is called GatherTown maybe, but Gather. And it kind of looks like an 8-bit pixel game. It looks like Stardew Valley, and it's, super cute. And I like it in that you can physically see everyone walking to the meeting, which is seems like, I would never think about that before, but it's cool to have that kind of virtual component. But it also has board games in it, and it has little arcade games that you can play together. It's really, really interesting, cool thing.
Yep, I love Gather. I also like that Gather brings a few ideas to the table that we have in real life and then replicates them. For example, in Gather, if you're talking while you're moving around and you're getting closer to someone, then at a certain distance, you start kind of hearing them, but faint. And then the closer you get, the louder you hear them.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to just listen in one or two conversations that are going on in Gather than in most other online tools. Most other online tools are only uniplex communication. Only one person can talk at a time.
Yep.
And in Gather, we start building the technology to break this up and bring back the multiplex communication that we're used to from real life.
Yeah, you get more of a chance for that ambient knowledge thing, or you know what we were saying earlier. You can see that there's a meeting of people going on over there, and you want to go see what they're talking about because you can physically see it in the virtual office, which is that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it gives you that sense of connected, right? Again, because you see people, like you can see, oh, there's Amber sitting at that desk, and versus like I'm gonna sit in like, hey Amber, you online?
Yeah. You got 5 for Zoom?
Feels much more casual once that kind of it gets into your normal working routine. I haven't used GatherTown specifically, but it doesn't sound intriguing. I'm a big fan of Sococo, or used Sococo in the past, and it's a similar thing. And I don't know if they're advanced as GatherTown, but it does the similar visual representation.
Yeah. Oh, something else that's cool about it too is that you get to decorate your desk space. Again, not something I would normally think about, but I get in there, I'm like, oh, I can put like a rainbow rug. I'm gonna just have like a super gay desk over here. It's amazing. I'm so excited about it. You know, you don't really get that virtually.
Yeah, and something you would do
that's
in
important,
person, right? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Christian.
Exactly, you would do it in person, and it's about personality and being able to express yourself as an individual, and that is important to keep alive.
Yeah, and it's good for team connection because you see your coworkers as people instead of a video you have to look at and talk to every once in a while.
And I think that something like Gather is better for the workplace than trying to really replicate the workplace online with virtual reality. Because with something like Gather, you have the benefit that you counter the loss of sensory information with an additional layer of sensory information, because the world is just 2D. And you look at it from a bird's eye view. So you see much more of what's going on. And if you just try to do a 3D world and you're in the world, then first of all, it's very distracting, especially if you're a person that is not regularly playing Counter-Strike or something like that. And it also takes away basically the see-through of the walls. And I think the see-through of the walls is a very important feature that you get with something like Gather.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm going to pull this over because I think it's a good theme of all of this. It's John, our biggest fan today. We're all human at the end of the day, not cogs in the machine. And I think that's 100% true and kind of the core of what makes all of this work. So we just have a couple. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this lack of walls is also something why if you look at just how the user interface of a tool works, I think Discord is a far better team tool than Slack. Because in Discord, I have voice channels and I can see which people are together on a voice channel. I don't see that in Slack or almost any other tool. I can see that in Teams, but I have to do a lot of extra effort in order to pull that information out of Teams. And Discord just very neatly pushes that information to me. I can look at it if I'm interested. I don't have to look at it. I don't have to do anything extra. And I think important information has to be pushed in a non-intrusive way, but pushed to the people that need the information. That's far more efficient than waiting for them to pull. Because that already then again has the same problems as handout. It's a waste.
Yeah, I think that's true. So this is a great discussion, and I'm sorry to have to cut it short, but we're right about at the end of time. Is there anything anybody wants to say before we go, or any questions we can answer before we hop off?
Yeah, please don't use the Agile Manifesto for arguing against remote collaboration. Yeah, face-to-face communication is great, but it's about the co-location of minds, not the co-location of bodies.
Yeah. All right.
I want to stick to the theme of be intentional. It's
Yep.
more work, and we have to recognize that, and just be intentional with everything.
Yep, I think so. Bye, friends.
Thank you.